Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about mediocre movies that we love. There are plenty of movies out there that are just guilty pleasures that aren't necessarily the greatest movies, but we can't help but love them anyway. So I'm going to share my picks for 6 mediocre movies that I love, as well as 2 franchises that are overall fairly mediocre, but I love them anyway. So let's get this intro out of the way and I'll get started. Welcome once again, my name's Austin and this channel is all about digging deeper and going further to better understand faith and film and everything that's in between. If that sounds exciting to you, make sure you click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on any new content. Before I get started on my list, I do want to share really quick, yesterday for me recording this video, just this week, I did my first live stream on another channel. So if you would like to check that out, I did that with Foxtail Cinematics, which is a new friend of mine. We had a great conversation about faith, film, and everything in between. He asked me some great questions about movies, about my faith, and we had some really good conversation about that. So if that's something you'd be interested in, I will link to that video in the description below, as well as at the end of this one. So if any of what I just said about that interests you, definitely check that out. It's a great conversation. My first pick for a mediocre movie that I love is going to be Prince of Persia and the Sands of Time. This is a movie that I've actually loved since the first time I saw it. I grew up playing some of the video games over at my cousin's house on his Nintendo GameCube, I think it was, and we always had fun doing that, and I was so excited when they announced that they were doing the movie, and then the fact that Jake Gyllenhaal was playing Dastan, the main character. I still remember I went to go see this one with one of my sisters in the theater, and we absolutely loved it. It's a really cool movie. I mean, it stinks that it didn't get a franchise kind of spawned off of it, because there's lots of really cool stuff in the games that they could have implemented, and I thought it was a great stepping off point for a first movie. Obviously, not everything's great about it. I mean, some of the special effects are not great, and as far as video game adaptations go, it obviously could have been better, but overall, I think it was a decent job and a really solid attempt. I really enjoy the story of this one that kind of revolves around this sand that can manipulate time for whoever is using it. And then we get some really cool themes of what it means to be a king and what someone would do with that kind of power. And it kind of, I guess in some ways, comes around with great power comes great responsibility. So there's your Marvel plug for the day. So I really enjoy this movie. I recognize it's not great in a lot of things, but in what I'm looking for, I think it's a really fun time with a cool premise. My second pick for another mediocre movie that I love is going to be Project Almanac. Project Almanac for me is one that I just love the concept of. I think it's really cool to explore, in my opinion, what real teenagers would do if they discovered time travel. Obviously, time travel is a very popular premise when it comes to science fiction movies, but I thought it was interesting that they took kind of a POV found footage style for this movie, and then also made it so it seemed like they were, pretty much normal teenagers exploring this technology and doing things that you would expect most teenagers to do with time travel. Again, I recognize the performances in this movie probably aren't great, but they're decent, and I enjoy the story. I enjoy the camaraderie and jokes that is shared amongst the friends, and I think the story ends up in a really cool place too at its conclusion. My next pick for mediocre movie that I love is going to be Premium Rush. Premium Rush is one that I've been a fan of for quite a long time, probably since it's been out. I think the thing I love most about this one is probably just purely the concept and the style. The fact that we have a really cool kind of action thriller about a bike messenger in New York City is really cool premise, and then just the unique style of the filmmaking, of the way that it implements its transitions between scenes, of very reflective of kind of the lifestyle of these bike messengers, following kind of like GPSs and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool, very stylized, and for me that's probably the biggest compliment I can give this one, is its really unique style. Fun premise. Again, maybe not the best performances all around, but I really enjoy Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I'm a big fan of Michael Shannon's. Any interesting villainous role that you can put him into, he's always going to do a great job. So I often revisit this one just for Michael Shannon's performance and the really unique style of this movie. Speaking of a unique twist on a film genre and an interesting style, my next pick is going to be Man on a Ledge. To me, the coolest thing about this movie is the fact that it is a heist movie disguised as something completely different. We are kind of set up to think that there's this guy who's thinking about committing suicide off a building, but it turns out that he is actually a cover-up for a heist that's happening nearby, and he's the distraction to keep all of the law enforcement occupied. I really enjoy this one. This is actually one of my wife's favorite movies, so even though it's overall considered kind of a mediocre film when it comes to the performances and everything's just maybe not as fulfilling as it sets out to be, I still find a lot of enjoyment in watching this, especially when it puts its cool twist on the heist genre. In my next pick, you're going to see a continuing trend of me just loving a concept. Next pick is going to be In Time. Again, the thing I love most about this movie is just purely the concept. The idea of people having a clock on their wrist, and when that clock runs out, you just die, is a really cool concept. And I love the way that it kind of converts and plays with that currency that people live with and implement in a society. I think it's a really cool social commentary on the things that we value as a society when it comes to where we put our value, whether it's with money, with things, with our own lives. I think it's a really cool concept, and it's explored in a really interesting way in this one. Again, everything about this could be better, but I still really enjoy, I think, Justin Timberlake and Amanda Seyfried give good performances. Again, similarly to Michael Shannon, I'm a huge Cillian Murphy guy, so I love anything that he's in. I think it does a really cool job as the time cop, so to speak. And again, this is just purely for me. I love this movie because of the concept alone. The story is decent, it's not bad, but for me, I just like exploring this world. And if they had continued making more movies within this world, that would have been really cool. But I also enjoy the fact that this is just kind of a one-off and a really cool movie to revisit once in a while. Last individual pick for my mediocre movies that I love list is going to be AVP, or Alien vs. Predator. Now this is the double feature that includes Alien vs. Predator as well as Alien vs. Predator Requiem, but we don't talk about Alien vs. Predator Requiem. We just want to focus on the first one here. Now the best way to go into this movie is, yes, it is Alien, it is Predator, two classic sci-fi monsters going head to head, and it could have been done a lot better, I'll admit it. But even though it's got its PG-13 rating, it's fairly mediocre as things go. The best way to go into this movie is look at it kind of in the sense of fan fiction. It's a high-budget fan fiction film of just two of the most classic and iconic alien monsters going head to head. If you just walk into it with that mindset, I think you're going to enjoy it much more than if you consider all of the other films and stuff that has happened combined into this. Just look at it as kind of a one-off fan film and enjoy the fact that we get to see these two iconic creatures go head to head. Now, for the first of my two picks for mediocre franchise picks, I'm first going to talk about the Underworld movies. This is a franchise that I didn't get into until round about the fourth movie coming out, and I went back, watched all of the movies leading up to that one, and then watched that one, and then the subsequent Blood Wars. So this is one that from the beginning, even though I got into this franchise late, I've always really enjoyed these movies. Again, I recognize the effects are pretty the style of the movie is very Matrix-esque, as were a lot of films that came out around this time that went with kind of a cyberpunk gothic style to it. But again, I really enjoy this action. I understand that the story's kind of complicated and maybe a little overcomplicated at times, but it's a really fun one. I enjoyed where the movie started with the first one. I still enjoy where they've gone since. I especially really like the Rise of the Lycans. You can see behind me kind of, in a way, prequel spin-off that they did where it looks back and kind of gives you more information and context to what's happening. I really like these movies. I think there's a lot of enjoyment in them, and even though they're very much kind of an early 2000s B movie, I think it's really cool that the franchise has gone on as long as it has, and it's still around. My second franchise pick and final pick for this mediocre movies that I love list may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but I understand and recognize that the Hobbit movies as a whole are fairly mediocre, but let me also justify my answer. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you probably know the Lord of the Rings are my favorite movies, consider them the greatest movies ever made, but I still have a very soft spot for the Hobbit trilogy. Again, there is a lot of things that went wrong with these movies when it comes to the special effects, the studio interference, and the creativity. A lot of different things happened that made these movies, in the end, fairly mediocre. Now, I haven't seen the extended editions yet that are behind me. I need to watch those soon. I got this somewhat recently off of my brother, but I've heard they do a better job as a whole with the story. They're a little bit closer to the vision that Peter Jackson intended for this trilogy, but the biggest compliment that I can give these movies, and the reason I enjoy them as much as they do, is because I just love getting to spend more time in the world of Middle-earth. Obviously, Martin Freeman and Ian McKellen give great performances. They're excellent casting as both Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf, and I love seeing them together. All of the dwarves are also great. There's a ton of fun camaraderie amongst them. The weakest elements of this movie are definitely kind of some behind-the-scenes stuff that happened, the special effects that are prioritized over practical effects, and I think they could have gone with stronger villain choices. But as a whole, I still really enjoy these movies. Again, the biggest compliment I give them is the fact that it's just so much fun and refreshing to spend more time in the world of Middle-earth. I still really enjoy all of that kind of expansion and exploration that we get to enjoy, and there's still some really good, really solid themes about friendship and a lot of other things that are really cool to explore. So those are my picks for 6 individual movies and 2 franchises full of mediocre movies, but ones that I still absolutely love. So make sure to share your picks down in the comments below. I love talking about movies that maybe aren't widely regarded as good or even great movies, but movies that we still love nonetheless. So share your picks in the comments down below. I look forward to seeing other movies that you guys mentioned. Until the next video, I'll see you soon.